Alright, welcome back to the channel. Warhammer Man back in the studio, and today's video we're going to take a look at the Tyranids and the most recent point changes in the chapter approved. So I've got my codex at hand, we've got our chapter approved points changes, and we're going to look through and see what went up and if anything went down, which I doubt. So we're going to take a look at it together. If you're new to the channel and you're into Warhammer 40,000, Kill Team Necromunda, Age of Sigmar, warcry, or some Horus Heresy, if you like to see at least one video every single day, reactions, reviews, news, painting, modeling, conversion tutorials, all GW tabletop game-based content, make sure to like and subscribe. It's absolutely free and really helps out the channel. So let's take a look at what we've got going on here for the Tyranids. So starting right off the bat, Broodlords we're really not seeing taken at all, did not change. Then we have the Hive Tyrant. This is the Hive Tyrant on foot. It was previously 160 points. It is now 180 points. So we see it did go up 20 points. All of the options stayed the same. Next we have the Neurothrope, still at 100 points. A strong unit. I almost expected that to go up, so surprising that it did not. Next we have Old One Eye. Old One Eye was 220 points and went up to 235. So we see about a 15-point increase on him. Not bad, but the truth is we see a general increase on Carnifexes. So he kind of just got lumped in there, I think. And next we have the Turbigon, previously 215 points. No change there. None with the options either. And then we have the Swarmlord. Swarmlord was 220 points and he went up to 240. So we're basically just seeing a general increase of 20 points to all Hive Tyrants, regardless of what type they are. Next we see the Trigon Prime. The Trigon Prime was 175 points. He went up, oh no, I'm sorry, he stayed the same. So everything is the same with options as well. And then we have the Tyranid Prime, was 85, still 85, no change on him or his options. And next we have the Flying Hive Tyrant or Winged Hive Tyrant. Went up from 190 to 210. No surprise there. So you see the 20-point increase on that one. In line with all the rest. Hive Tyrants obviously are very good. I honestly think that the raise in the Flying Hive Tyrant made sense. I think for the Foot Hive Tyrant, maybe 10 points would have been enough. And for Swarmlord, 10 points as well. I don't think that a regular Hive Tyrant or Swarmlord are nearly as good as the Flying or the Winged Hive Tyrants. So seeing them all go up 20 points just says that we're probably going to see less Hive Tyrants. And honestly, way less on Foot or Swarmlords, which we already weren't seeing a ton of to begin with. I guess really like maybe the Hive Tyrant change was because of Shard Gullet, the unique Venom Cannon. So it was pretty strong, obviously. But again, not amazing. So it's kind of strange to see that. It's kind of strange to see that just general increase in all Hive Tyrants. Because in my opinion, I would rather see the Winged Hive Tyrant go up and the other two Hive Tyrants go up less or not move at all, aka the Swarmlord and the Foot Hive Tyrant. Because I would rather see a mix of different Hive Tyrants. I think now it's going to be very hard for anybody to decide to take a Swarmlord or a regular Hive Tyrant. I think we're going to probably see a couple less Hive Tyrants. Like we're not going to see people with 3 Hive Tyrants. Probably going to still see people with 2. Most armies will at least have 1, obviously. But I don't think we're going to see any less Flying Hive Tyrants because of the changes, in the points at least. I think we will definitely see less Foot Hive Tyrants and Swarmlords, but I don't think they were really an issue. So in my opinion, the point increase on the Flying Hive Tyrant makes sense. 20 points, definitely the right thing to do. But for the Walking Tyrant and the Swarmlord, 20 points just going to make it so we never see any of them. So we're just going to see more consistent amounts of Flying Hive Tyrants, which is not what the goal is when you raise points, in my opinion. You're looking more for balance, I think. So that being said, moving on to the Gargoyles, we see they're still at 8 points. We see Hormagaunts are still at 8 points, no changes to them. We see Termagaunts were 7, still 7, and no changes to any of their equipment. Next we have Tyranid Warriors. So squad size, everything's the same, but they have gone up by 5 points. So we see the basic Tyranid Warrior going up by 5 points. So if your typical army is taking about, usually you see at least 1 squad of 6 and then a couple squads of 3. So you're talking about 12 Tyranid Warriors going up by 5 points each. So that's a 60-point increase to the army. That is definitely a big deal. That is definitely a big deal. So that is going to change. Now, are people all of a sudden going to start taking more Gaunts or more Gargoyles? Maybe it will make some slight changes, but I don't think it's going to be a huge difference. I think overall that's the right thing to do, though. Tyranid warriors, in my opinion, were slightly undercosted, and I think 30 points is really where they should have been the entire time. So now it is worth noting too, while we're here, they did not change the upgrades for the unit points wise or affecting the entire unit. So previously, like adrenal glands were 15 points for the whole unit, flesh hooks 5 points for the whole unit, and toxin sacks 10 points for the whole unit. As where on the other troop choices like the gaunts and stuff, you had to pay per model. So if you had, say, a hormigaunt squad of 20 hormigaunts and you want to give them adrenal glands, it's 2 points per model. As where on the Tyranid warriors, it's per the unit. So it actually incentivizes you to take larger units of Tyranid warriors, which with some of their cool stratagems and stuff like the -1 damage, that can be pretty good. So I like it. I think they did the right thing here overall, but I think there was definitely an option for them to change how the upgrades worked on the warriors to bring them in line with everything else. So I don't dislike what they did there, but definitely worth note that they didn't change that. So on to our elites now. So we have the Death Leaper. Death Leaper obviously was very good, strong model. He was previously 95 points, and he's up to 120. So he went up by 25 points. Again, he is very good. Is he 25 points more good? I don't know. We'll really have to see, because the truth was I like the Death Leaper, but at 120 I wasn't taking him. Or I'm sorry, at 95 I wasn't taking him. Could have squeezed him in a couple places, but he just didn't quite fit into my list specifically. But at 120, I think we see a lot less Death Leapers, honestly. Still very good and has some super cool stuff, some very cagey abilities. But at 120, I'm just not sure that he pays for himself in functionality. Definitely not in killing, but I'm not sure he pays for himself in functionality. Now, turning off stratagems for things that he's in combat with is definitely strong, and not being able to target outside of 12. But to tell you the truth, it's kind of like counterintuitive, because he always wants to be kind of not in the middle of things like the straight up thick of it, but kind of on like the outskirts of the thick of it, because he wants to be able to get where he needs to be. But if he's got a bunch of stuff around him, he's going to die easily. So his ability is basically to expend himself for like one big use, or to kind of sit back and, you know, hold objectives or do some kind of like around the outskirts type stuff. So at 120 points, I'm just not sure he can achieve that now. So just not sure we're going to see much of the Death Leaper. But he was very strong before. I think probably, you know, a 10-point increase or even 15 points would have been fine. I think 25 points is basically saying like, hey, we don't want him in the game anymore. Next we have the Gene Stealers. Gene Stealers are still at 16 points. No change to them or their equipment. Horospecs next, still at 170. We really weren't seeing the Horospecs. It's got some potential now, maybe, that a bunch of other stuff went up. It was okay before, but not amazing. Lictor is next, still 70 points. So the Maleceptor was one of the biggest increases in the entire codex. He went from 170 to 220. And while I do think the Maleceptor is a strong unit, this is a mistake in my opinion. This is too much of a points bump for him. He's very good, and his ability to dish out mortal wounds is very good, but he's not that fast. So with the limited range on his psychic and the mortal wound ability, he's really got to get in the thick of things. For 220 points, I mean, we're still going to see them on the table, but they have 2 casts. They recently changed how the stratagems work, so now you can't give him the 3rd cast. So that was already a big change. That alone is like basically making him cost 30 more points. Because previously you could play the stratagem on him, and then you could use the Maleceptor to cast a 3rd time. So you could use a 3rd psychic power, and then with his special ability, assuming he was undamaged, you could do an extra 3 points, 3 mortal wounds by casting that 3rd psychic power. So you're paying a command point, you're casting whatever psychic power you haven't cast yet, and then you're getting an extra 3 mortal wounds potentially on it. All very good. So when they took away the ability for the Maleceptor to use that stratagem, because now it's only for characters and he's not a character, that alone, you know, made him 33% less effective, because his main purpose is to just dish out mortal wounds. The actual psychic powers he casts are good and everything, but you can put them on anybody. The real benefit is to deal the extra 3 mortal wounds on each cast, like above 8. So the truth is, he already got nerfed with the stratagems and a couple other things. So this 50-point bump on the Maleceptor, I mean, we're not going to not see them anymore, but that is a huge, huge change. I mean, anybody that was taking 3, not going to be taking 3 anymore. Anybody that was taking 2, maybe still taking 2, but probably going to 1. Because if you have 2 Maleceptors in your army, that's an extra 100 points your army just went up. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff you can get for an extra 100 points. I mean, you could literally, I mean, I don't know. That's a mistake in my opinion. That's too many points. You could take literally another Neurothrope. A Neurothrope is 100 points and is going to dish out a bunch of damage and is an excellent supporting unit for your army. So, you could almost take, I mean, at this point in time, a Neurothrope and a unit of Zoanthropes is 250 points. And 3 Zoanthropes with a Neurothrope, the Neurothrope can buff the Zoanthropes, and then they're already getting +3 to their cast and +3 mortal wounds. So they only get 1 cast, but you could do more mortal wounds now with the Zoanthropes, basically getting like super smites off and doing, I don't know. That was kind of a random tangent there, but I just think there's a lot of other viable options now. The Maleceptor is very good, but for 50 more points, I think we're going to see a lot less of them, and obviously that is, their goal. So next, Pyrovores, they went up from 30 to 40 points, so they went up 33 points. I don't really think Pyrovores are very good. I mean, they're okay. I've never seen Pyrovores just doing amazing things, and you're like, oh my gosh, these are just devastating. They're okay. Their main benefit was that they were a super cheap unit of 1. You can obviously take 1 to 3, but to be able to just get a Pyrovore for 30 points and just have this single unit that's fairly durable, that has the ability to, flame some stuff, is pretty good. At 40 points, I don't think you stop using them, but, previously if you were taking a couple of these, maybe you start looking at other things. Maybe you start looking at something like Rippers, or, I don't know, there's definitely some other options out there. But at 40 points apiece, at this point in time, it's kind of like, I don't know. I was not a big fan of the Pyrovores to begin with. I do think it's right that they went up 10 points, but now I'm just not sure how viable they are. Maybe 5 points would have been better. We'll see. Next, we have the Toxicrene, 150 points, no changes. Then we have our Tyrant Guard. So the Tyrant Guard, they did not change. The Tyrant Guard stayed the same, which is an interesting change, honestly, because the Tyrant Guard obviously is used in tangent with the Hive Tyrants to make them, essentially like untargetable. So you're hitting the Tyrant Guard instead. So they raised the points on all the Hive Tyrants, but left the Tyrant Guard the same. I'm not sure how I like that. I honestly would have rather them leave the Swarm Lord like 10 points cheaper and the regular Foot Tyrant 10 points cheaper, and then raise the Tyrant Guard by like 5 points apiece. But that is an interesting move. So are we going to see more Tyrant Guard now? I'm not really sure. I think the changes in the other stuff compared to the Tyrant Guard is going to make it so people are more apt to protect their expensive Hive Tyrants with Tyrant Guard, but I don't know. It's sort of meh for me. I'm just surprised that they didn't go up in points. I would have thought they would have went up 5 points, honestly. Next, we have the Venomthropes, 35 points before, 35 points now, no change. Zoanthropes, still 50 points, no change. On to the Fast Attack. Next, we have the Maulak. Weren't seeing many of these guys. He's got some like interesting rules, but they're not particularly great. Still 125, no change. Mucilid Spores were 20, still 20, again, no change. Parasite of Mortrex, still 80 points, no change there. He's pretty good. I don't think he needed to go up in points. Honestly, I think that was probably the best decision. Next, the Raveners. So I anticipated a 5-point increase on the Raveners. That's what we got. I think that's right in line. The Warriors and the Raveners are very good, very strong for their points cost, and a 5-point increase is not going to make it so you don't take them, but it is going to make it so they're much more reasonably costed, in my opinion. So another good change. And when you do something like that, a quick 5 points on something, I think a lot of times it's going to stop people from spamming them. So if you had people that were taking 12 to 18 Raveners, or Warriors for that matter, people are going to think twice about that now and maybe take some Gargoyles or something different instead. And I think that's what it's all about, is getting more diversity in the units that are fielded. So next we have the Ripper Swarms, still 15 points. Again, now you can get 3 Ripper Swarms for 45 points, and that's basically the same points as a Pyrovore. I'm not sure that Ripper Swarms aren't better now, because you can deep strike them into certain areas. They're little, so you can easily hide them from line of sight. I really think there's maybe some play for Ripper Swarms now with some of the recent changes and them staying the same. So Rippers may be going to be okay. We'll have to see. They're obviously not going to do much like killing or surviving, but with a bunch of wounds and their small size, they can tie up units that are not meant to be in combat. And for cheap and deep strike, I think they're okay now, honestly. So Spore Mines did not change, still 10 points apiece. Trigon is next, was 145, still 145, no change. And then for our heavy support next, we have the Biovores. Again, no change. The Biovores, we weren't seeing a ton of them played, but honestly, I would have liked to see the Biovores go up by 5 points. They're really good. I think they're underestimated how good they actually are. I really think they should have went up 5 points. 50 points is not unreasonable. It's not going to stop people from taking them, but that little bit of extra points I think would have put them more in line with where they should be. So just because they can shoot those Spore Mines and move block, and if you figure you have, let's say, just a unit of 3 of them back behind cover where nobody can see them or anything, you're basically dropping, on average, it's 1 to 3 Spore Mines per, not shooting at a unit, but just move blocking with the Spore Mines. You're shooting like 2 on average per. So if you look at a Spore Mine costs 10 points, and on average, assuming your Biovores live the whole game, and for 5 turns, they drop 2 per, at the end of that 5 turns, two Spore Mines per turn, each one is basically dropping 10 Spore Mines. And a Spore Mine is 10 points. So they're dropping 100 points worth of Spore Mines plus existing on their own, and they're 45 points. And then again, now are we going to see, because the big difference before between the, looking at when a unit goes up, you then look at what you could use to replace that unit for around the same points. And I think the Pyrovores being 40 points now and the Biovores being 45, I think now you take Biovores, because the majority of the time with the Pyrovores, they're sort of just standing back like defensively, or stopping deep strike, or maybe going after like some cheap chaff or something like that. I think the Biovores have much more play now if they're going to only be 5 points apart. So now instead of seeing 3 Pyrovores, maybe now you see 3 Biovores, either in a single unit or separate. We'll see. I think the Biovores have a lot more play now. So next, Carnifexes. So the Carnifexes across the board went up 15 points. We saw it with old One Eye, who's okay, but not really getting taken that often. Regular base Carnifex now, 115. We see no changes to the equipment though. So just went up straight up 15 points just for the chassis. Or the meat chassis in this case. Next we have the Exocrine. Exocrine was 170, went up to 200. Exocrines are good. The most competitive list, I didn't really see any Exocrines in. So with this move up to 200 points, I think they're going to go from being good to okay. The damage output is still good. They can still do a bunch of damage, and they're still good, and they're still durable. But at 200 points, I think we see a lot less Exocrines. A lot less Exocrines. Next we have the Hive Guard, and we weren't seeing that many to begin with. So next we have the Hive Guard. Oh, did I confuse myself earlier? No, okay. So yeah, so the Hive Guard we're seeing literally 0 of these. Obviously they've been the only thing that was good in Tyranids for like the last 5 years. So suddenly seeing, Hive Guard never taken anymore doesn't surprise me. So no change to them. We're still not going to see them ever. They're no good now. They're terrible. So next we have the Screamer Killer. So 130 points he went up to from 115. Again, I think this was the right decision. Screamer Killers, in my opinion, are the best Carnifexes by far, especially in something like Jormungandr, where you can have basically 3 of them in a brood, and then for 1 command point, you can deep strike 3 Carnifexes. That was huge. Massively, massively powerful. We didn't see it used very often. Honestly, no one took Jormungandr, but that's a very, very strong unit. You could basically deep strike 2 units of 3 Screamer Killers. So you drop 6 Carnifexes right up 9 inches away from your opponent, and then they split into 6 individual units, and potentially with some of the charge bonuses, you could have reroll charges, you could have pluses to your charges, etc. Very, very strong. And part of what makes Carnifexes cheap is they have to run across the board and your opponent shoots them the whole time. If they just show up 9 inches away, they're awesome. So Screamer Killers definitely should have gone up 15 points. I do agree with this. Overall Carnifexes though, especially old One Eye, probably pushing it a little bit. The other Carnifexes are good, but not. I think the Screamer Killers are substantially better. So next we have the Thornbacks, went from 115 to 130. Again, just the typical 15-point upgrade. In my opinion, shooting Carnifex is just not that good. There's some of them with venom cannons. There's maybe some play for them, but the real way to run Carnifexes is specialized. And the best specialized Carnifex is a Screamer Killer, and that's why we see them more than anything. I think they should have probably just raised the price on all Carnifexes, maybe 10 points, and then Screamer Killers 15 or something like that. Or maybe 5 on everything else and 15 on the Screamer Killers. But it is what it is. Everything's up 15. So next we have the Tyrannofex. Tyrannofex was 170, still 170, but we see some changes to his points. So his acid spray was 5 points, and it went up to 20 points. Adrenal glands, rupture cannon, and toxin sacs, all the same. So apparently the acid spray was just too strong. So if you want to take a Tyrannofex still, that's fine. But if you want to take a Tyrannofex with acid spray, he went up by 15 points. Weren't seeing a ton of Tyrannofexes out there, and most of them were using a rupture cannon. The acid spray is okay, but is it worth another 15 points? No, I wasn't taking Tyrannofexes before, and I'm definitely not taking Tyrannofex now, especially not with acid spray. So I think the rupture cannon is the better weapon. So it's weird that they raised that. I mean, why didn't they just take away the 20-point upgrade for acid spray or rupture cannon and just make him 190? That would have made more sense to me, because now the only, I don't know. It weird change in my opinion. Weird change, as we really weren't seeing them. For me, the way I look at it is if you're seeing the Tyranids dominant, you should look at what units are making them dominant and change those, not just kind of hit random units, because the whole goal is to stop people from all running the same army. When you have an amazing army and everything's super efficient, everybody takes the same thing, you lose out on like the diversity of the codex and like the kind of play that different units have against each other within the same codex. That's a big flaw. I always see people comparing a unit in one codex to a unit in another codex, but you're not taking into account all of the other things. Like, people always talk Necron comparisons as the number one. They're like, oh, if we take this Necron unit, it's this much, but this Tyranid unit is this much. And you just can't really do that. You have to compare it to other units in the same book, because Tyranids don't have like will be back rules, and they don't have, all the different, they have completely different abilities, so you can't try to cost them the same and compare them to each other. It's not a viable comparison. It's basically like comparing Games Workshop's prices and models to like some other trash company that sells 50 models for $20. It's just not the same thing. That's my opinion. Obviously it's a hot take. Don't hate me for it, but it is my opinion. So next we have our dedicated transports. So we have the Tyrannocyte, went from 100 points to 110 points. I don't think I ever saw someone use a Tyrannocyte, and maybe like once somebody drops like a Maliceptor with a Tyrannocyte or something like that. I think this is a joke. I mean, nobody was taking them anyway before, so who cares now? But I don't know. Maybe you put a Swarmlord in a Tyrannocyte, and that's what they're afraid of. Strange choice, in my opinion. Strange choice. Next we see Flyers. So the Harpy was 160, went up to 175. Venom Cannon was 5, went up to 15. So obviously the go-to for a Harpy is to take 2 Harpies with double Venom Cannons. They were good at 170 points total for a Harpy with 2 Venom Cannons. At 205, I'm not sure they are. I mean, the Harpies are they're strong. They do a bunch of damage. They're very good. They have a lot of play. At 205 points, they die so easy. I mean, there's a lot of games I have watched or played, etc., where where you see harpies, basically 2 harpies in most Tyranids armies right off the bat, fly off, do some damage, and then die, basically on the first turn. And if you don't get first turn, there's no way you're hiding them or anything. So a lot of times they just get killed right off the bat. So for me, I think harpies definitely needed to go up. I like the way they did it, where they raised the base cost of the harpy, and then they also raised the weapon. So you could still take harpies with barbed stranglers, which are far inferior, for cheaper. But over 200 points apiece, I'm just not sure we see nearly as much play on these, because you can just take something exponentially more durable that just does a little less damage. I mean, dropping spore mines, doing mortal wounds when you fly over stuff is good. You're probably only doing it 1 or 2 turns before they're destroyed. Having 2 venom cannons that you can position to shoot at basically like whatever you want is good. It's definitely good. But again, I'm just not sure. I think they basically just essentially removed harpies from the meta, in my opinion. So we'll see how other people receive it. But I think at 205 points apiece, you get a lot more play from some other stuff in this book. I think at 170 it was good. I think at 205 it's mediocre at best, subpar. So next we have the adaptive physiologies. I don't see any changes on the adaptive physiologies. All stayed the same. And then we have the hive crone, which is the other alternative for the harpy. Much, much worse. I don't think I've ever seen someone use a hive crone, at least in like competitive play. They went up 10 points as well. So I think what they did here, they went from 150 to 160. I think what they were going for is, hey, we don't want them to just stop taking harpies and just take hive crones now, which I don't think was an issue. But at the extra 10 points, it's like you better think twice about it if you were thinking about that. So, and then finally we have the fortifications, spore assist. So 95 points for the spore assist, still no change. We didn't see a ton of play on spore assist, okay? But I think they're actually really good. Every turn, the spore assist can drop 6 spore mines. So spore mines cost 10 points. So in one turn, you drop 60 points worth of spore mines on the table. So over 5 turns, you put this thing like back out of line of sight, sort of somewhere kind of covered, and they're literally just dumping spore mines every turn. And then your opponent has to go out and try to hunt them down and kill them, which they're not really doing much. They're more just like move blocking. So they're trying to stop the source of your spore mines. They have to go like deep into your territory. These things are really strong. I mean, look at it by the same way we looked at the, what are they called? Oh my gosh. Brain fart. The biovores. Biovores being able to pump out average 2 per turn, and they're 45 points. The spore assist is 95 points and pumps out just a flat 6 every turn. So by 5 turns, 1 spore assist has pumped out 30 spore mines. So assuming it doesn't die during the game, you have literally created 300 points worth of spore mines for 95 points. So just because we weren't seeing a ton of these doesn't mean they're not good. I think the move block ability or just straight up mortal wound ability of spore mines is very good and has been kind of like underestimated. We've seen obviously how the harpies doing mortal wounds is good or dropping spore mines is good, and they drop 3 a turn or do, on average, let's say to a 10-man unit, like 5 mortal wounds a turn. This thing has a lot of play. So, obviously if you take barbed stranglers, it is another 5 points per, and there's 5 of them. If you take venom cannons, it's another 10 points per, and 5 of them. So he's 50 points more expensive with venom cannons, and 25 points more expensive with the barbed stranglers. So realistically, you're looking at basically like 120 points for this guy. But again, still, on average, if he lasts 5 turns, you're dropping 300 points worth of spore mines. So kind of a big deal. So that is it for the points updates on the actual Tyranid Codex. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Forge World Tyranids as well, though, because we basically saw Forge World Tyranid stuff just disappear with the new points and the new Codex. And we didn't see like specific changes that need to happen to like some of the data sheets and everything on the Forge World stuff. Maybe we're going to see that into the future. But looking at a Malanthrope, Malanthrope is 150 points. The big thing about the Malanthrope is basically once the Venomthropes got rid of the, they still have to have 3 in the unit to give things -1, the Malanthrope went away. So, because you can buy 3 Venomthropes for 35 points apiece, so 105 points, and get the -1 to be hit. The Malanthrope is 150 points, so 45 points more expensive, and basically does the same thing. So your goal on this is to basically have the -1 to hit. Also, Venomthropes got very good with their other abilities, and the most important change is that when one of them dies now, they don't lose the -1. Previously, the unit size had to be at least 3, or they lost the -1. So if you had 3 of them and one died, they no longer gave your army the -1 within 6 inches. So it made them very much less effective. You could just kill one and then they were basically useless, for their main purpose. As were with the Malanthrope, you couldn't target the Malanthrope, and then obviously, if you can't kill him, you can't get rid of the -1. So that's a big change that basically made the Malanthrope kind of useless. So I don't think we're going to see much play out of him. Next we have Fast Attack, Myetic Spores, still 20 points. Sky Slasher Swarms. Okay, this one is curious to me. Unit size is 3 to 9 models. So they're the same price as the regular Rippers. Because the regular Rippers are 15 per. And then if you give them the Spine Maws, here you pay 3 points per model, as opposed to with the regular ones, you pay 10 for the unit. So basically, if you were going to use a unit of these with Spine Maws, 3 of them cost 9 points. If you were going to use a unit of the other ones with Spine Maws, you could have a unit of 9 of them, and you pay 10 points for the whole unit to have Spine Maws. So it would normally be a 27 point mod if you're paying 3 per, and instead it's only 10. So now, are Spine Maws good? No, they're terrible. But that being said, these ones are faster and much more useful. I think Sky Slasher Swarms have some play. I really do. I think Rippers and Sky Slasher Swarms have been underestimated and probably have some play, especially now with the points changes and them staying the same. So next we have the Demicaran. 280 points for the Demicaran. Strong unit. Not really durable, but strong unit for sure. Now that we see some points changes to some of the other strong units, they may start to see a little resurgence now. And then Barbed Haradul, 275 points, or Scythe Haradul, 235 points. The Barbed Haradul, obviously the difference is he has 2 Barbed Stranglers, and the Scythe Haradul has, melee primarily. They're both good at melee. The Scythe is specialized in melee. The Barbed is melee plus shooting. So for the Barbed Haradul, I'm not sure it's great now. But for the Scythe one, at 235 points, now that we've seen some of the other unit increases, I think this guy really has some play here. So we'll see. Again, it depends on kind of how the data sheets play and everything. But next we have the Stone Crusher Carnifex, 120 points for the Stone Crusher. And then Lord of War, we see Haradan, still 700 points. And then we see the Hierophant at 850 points. So there's maybe some play on these. Still, the big stuff is really expensive, but maybe like the Barbed Haradul and possibly Demicaran have a little more play now with these point changes. So, but that is it for the Tyranid Codex. That is it for the upgrades. I'm curious what other people think, especially other Tyranid players on these, or people that played against Tyranids a lot. I think overall, your average Tyranid army probably went up by about 10 to 20%, depending what you were fielding. Depending what you were fielding, your army went up by 10 to 20%. So you're going to literally get 10 to 20% less stuff now. I think that is a big change, not to be underestimated. Just looking through at your basically like typical 2,000 points, you basically are looking at increase-wise for that 2,000 point army. Most of them had 2 Winged Hive Tyrants, so that's 40 points up right there. And then most of them had, let's say 12 Warriors. That's another 60 points right there. So you have 100 points already. And then you have a Death Leaper, basically another 25 points, so that's 125 increase. And then you have 2 Maliceptors, that's another 100 points, 50 each. So that's 225 point increase. So that's already over 20% increase on like your competitive armies. And then if you take a couple Harpies and throw them in there as well, you're 225. And then, assuming you had them with Venom Cannons, obviously, those went up by, 35 points apiece. 10, 20, 35 points apiece. Yeah. So that's another 70. So your army has basically went up by 300 points, roughly, if you were taking like, the kind of go-to competitive Tyranid army. So trimming out 300 points now is essentially like removing, a Harpy and a unit of warriors, or, basically losing the Death Leaper and a Harpy or something like that. So this is a huge, huge change to Tyranids. Tyranids were very strong. We saw them at a lot of top tables and doing well in tournaments. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. And then also we saw some Tyranids winning tournaments, but not nearly as many as you would think or people were acting like. So I think part of the problem people were having with Tyranids is they were new and the meta hadn't quite shifted to them yet. Because I don't think they were actually, I think they were very good. They were definitely very good, but I don't think they were as good as people were pretending like they were, or acting like they were, or afraid that they were. We'll see how they play out now. I think this is a massive, massive hit to Tyranids. Basically, like your typical Tyranid army going up by 300 points is a huge hit. I mean, that is just, I don't think most Tyranid armies are going to still be competitive 300 points more expensive or with 300 points less. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm sure there's some play for some of the other units now. It's probably going to change army composition some. But overall, I think more than anything, you're just getting less units. So you guys let me know what you think down below. Did I miss anything? Is anything, kind of now looking a little more juicy as some of the other units have gone up? There was sort of like the, I would take this, but this is better. And now it's like if this just went up by 50 points, what can I take instead of Maliceptors? What can I take instead of Harpies? Because now, I mean, the weird thing about the Harpies is going up to 205 points. Now you're like, well, I mean, what can I get that does the same thing for around 205 points? And, there's a lot of stuff out there. Maybe now we start seeing people take Hive Crones and, a single Biovore or something like that. Because for the same points now, you can still drop Spore Mines on the board. You can still do Mortal Wounds over the turns. And then you still have a big flyer that can, disrupt your opponent. Or, something else like that. Maybe it's not going to be the Harpies upset by the Hive Crone, but something different. But it is definitely interesting to see how this is going to adjust the meta. So let me know what you think down below. Obviously, Tyranids were pretty tough, and they were definitely like a kind of feel bad army, so I'm glad they brought them back into line. Hopefully they're not so bad now that no one takes them. Obviously the goal is for everybody's army to be fun and competitive, and obviously Tyranids were too good before. So did they go overboard with these points increases? I think in a couple places they probably did, but overall I think they really just wanted to bring some balance to the game, and I think this is going to do it, because we're going to see a lot less Harpies. We're going to see a lot less Maliceptors. I think that's probably it. I think we probably just see less Harpies, less Maliceptors, and probably less Death Leapers. Maybe no Death Leapers. So they changed it around for sure. There's definitely plenty of play still in the Codex. But I think they did the right thing overall. They just might have went a little too hard on the Maliceptor. If they didn't change like the stratagems, I think, and the Maliceptor could still cast 3 times for a command point, I think that's one thing. If they didn't change the command points to where if you take basically like 2 detachments and now a relic and a warlord trait, you're starting with like 1 command point. I think if they didn't make those changes, this would make a lot more sense. But a lot of the Tyranids' strength came from multiple detachments and lots of command point usage. So without multiple detachments or having to pay a larger chunk of your command points, 50% of your starting command points for a second detachment, I don't know. I'm really not sure how that's going to play out. So maybe we see less second detachments and we see less Hive Tyrants because you can only have one per detachment. It's definitely a possibility. We definitely see less harpies, as the harpies were good, but because they die so easily, you know, if you only get one turn of play out of them, or none if your opponent goes first, there's no way to hide a harpy. So in all reality, it's going to be a big change. So I'm going to do a video similar to this also for Tau Empire and then Eldari as well, as those are the two other armies I'm the most familiar with the points and the play and the composition of armies, etc. So keep your eye out for those. And then obviously we do a video every single day: Warhammer 40,000, Kill Team Necromunda, Age of Sigmar, Warcry, or Horus Heresy, reactions, reviews, news, all kinds of painting, modeling, conversion tutorials. We've got a big commission, an expansion commission for one of our favorite clients coming out of the studio here very soon. It's actually a double expansion commission, and it is a nice, big, juicy bunch of custodes. They look great, and definitely looking forward to revealing those. So keep your eye out for those. We always show off all the techniques we did to do a commission, all the custom bases, painting styles, paints used, etc. So make sure you check those out as well. Keep your eye out for that video coming very soon. But that's it for today. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm out of here.